Viel relevanter ist das nächste Video. Das habe ich in meine Timeline gespült gekriegt und ich finde es wichtig. Zu welcher Zeit war es eigentlich besser? 1955 oder 2025? Also, wer hat es besser? Tipps jetzt in den Chat.
Here I am in 1975 and 1995, 2015, and then today. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a middle-income earner in all of these decades to answer a very important question about the United States. Is the average American better off today than they were all these decades ago? Does the typical American make more money, have a better chance of owning a home?
So, ich gebe jetzt mal den automatischen Übersetzer an, damit ihr mal seht, dass das eventuell ein bisschen kritisch ist, aber nehmen wir mal.
It's an important question because this graph shows that our economy has grown immensely since the 50s. I mean, we've got the largest economic pie on Earth. And even when you account for inflation and the fact that our population has grown, you still see immense growth. I mean, look at this. We've added tons of prosperity in this country that theoretically every person is entitled to some part of. Or, as some economists put it, has our country produced shared prosperity?
When I think about how well the economy delivers, I think about how well it delivers for the people, for the workers and their families. How well are they receiving that prosperity?
I'm going to show you how all of this economic prosperity we've created has been shared or not shared.
Sanfte, besinnliche Musik.
And in all of this, I want to get to the bottom of perhaps one of the most important questions in our country, which is everyone able to move up? If they work hard enough or if they get educated, can you climb the economic ladder here?
Are you going to do better than your parents? Can you reach higher levels of income? Can you change your relative position?
The American dream, we sometimes call it. A, quote, dream of a better, richer, happier life for all citizens of every rank. Is that still alive? And if not, why? I believe that answering these key questions is incredibly important for the future of this country, which is why we've been deep in all of the data, and I'm going to try to lay it out as clearly as possible by traveling through time. As always, all of the assertions in this video are fact-checked and linked in our sources. So with that, let's start traveling back in time.
Can't repeat the past. Why, of course you can.
Okay, so I'm traveling back towards the 1950s. As we move through time, I'm going to be keeping an eye on this main graph. This graph is kind of our anchor. It will be showing how the economy has grown over time. And again, it's adjusted for prices and population growth. When this graph goes up, it means that there's more economic prosperity to go around. We're going to see how it gets divided up. And for each decade, I'm going to be looking at these 4 economic indicators. Am I making more money? Can I afford a house? Is this economic growth being shared equally by everyone? And how likely am I to be making more than my parents? Oh, look. We're arriving to the 1950s.
Oh Mann, das wird jetzt sehr interessant. Let's go, die 50er.
So it's the 1950s here in America, and I, the middle-income earner, had just returned from fighting in the most devastating war of human history. But we Americans came out on top, and our economy is booming. I work in this car factory. It's one of the many factories that was converted from making weapons to now making valuable stuff that we're shipping around the world. Our country is getting rich. I am making an average income. So my income right now is $4,400. In today's money, that's more like $41,000.
Ja, im Jahr.
We're going to adjust everything for modern dollars, in this case, 2023 dollars.
Okay.
Prices are higher these days, so our money's more valuable to make it all make sense. Okay, wait, pause. I'm not going to do that every single time, like talk about the inflation. I'm just going to say everything from now on in modern dollars. It'll allow us to compare a lot easier between the decades. Okay, with that, let's get all the magic going again. Pretty cool, right? Let's meet my family. So my wife doesn't work. Only a third of women did back then. And really, she doesn't need to. My factory job supports the whole family. And look, I own that home. I paid $84,000 for this thing, again in modern dollars. That's actually
2 Jahresgehälter. 2 Jahresgehälter.
Actually not that much more than my yearly salary. This is considered very affordable. And a major reason why is because the government is helping me pay for a lot of this. And they've got the cash to do it. I mean, look at the top tax rate for the rich.
Ja, ladies and gentlemen. Da steht 92%.
So, a booming economy and all this tax revenue means that the government is helping build all of these suburban homes and is giving us veterans good deals on mortgages so that we can get in on the prospering U.S. economy, start building wealth by owning a home.
Our returning serviceman who was starting his own business would get a financial boost from the government. Our money would be advanced to buy property or a home.
We're coming out of World War II. There are absolutely lots of public programs. Policymakers today and back then had a lot to do with how typical workers and their families were doing.
Okay, so the economy is booming. Let's see how all of this prosperity is being shared. And for that, I'm going to show you this amazing graph. I love this graph. We're going to see it over the decades, and it tells a very useful story. This is my income, the median earner. Here's the income of the top earners, and this line is the low income in America. And down here is like years. Okay, watch what happens. Ready, go.
Alles relativ zusammen, ne? Also die Top Earners, Median Earners, Low Earners, alles relativ nah beieinander.
Look at this. Look what's happening. All three of these income brackets are increasing their income at the same rate. We are all getting in on this prosperity. We are sharing the spoils of a booming economy. Nice.
In the roughly 2-3 decades after World War II, we saw what I would consider broadly shared prosperity. As the economy grew, as workers became more productive, workers across the board were actually seeing gains in their living standards.
This is a great indicator that income equality in the United States is good and healthy. Okay, last thing for the 1950s, let's check in on the American dream. Can I move up the ladder? And there's a really nice data set for this that says that I am nearly 100% likely to earn more than my parents. There is upward motion in the economy. The American dream is alive, at least for me, which is an important caveat here. Women were mostly left out of this economic version of the American dream, and so were people who weren't white. Like Black Americans, 10% of the population, over 1 million of whom fought in the war, but upon returning were met with these custom maps that were drawn to determine where they could and could not buy homes. They were largely left out of all of this government help that allowed me to get education and buy a home and build wealth. But if you're just looking at the numbers, the 1950s was a really good time.
Johnny Harris' Vater ist beim Militär ein Navy-U-Boot-Kommandant, der Mormone ist. Wenn es um Wirtschaft geht, ist Harris meh. Okay, jetzt hast du eine Menge familiäre Verhältnisse klargestellt, die ich jetzt nicht im Zusammenhang mit den Inhalten aus diesem Video stellen kann. Kannst du mir inhaltlich denn sagen, was in diesem Video zum jetzigen Zeitpunkt falsch ist? Weil ich habe noch nichts erkannt, von dem ich zumindest grob sagen kann, auf Basis meines stümperhaften Wissens, dass das falsch ist. Besonders im Zusammenhang mit dem Hinweis, dass dieser amerikanische Aufschwung sowohl für Frauen als auch für die schwarze Bevölkerung nicht gilt.
Time for the median income earner. You can have a family, work in a factory, and be loaded with opportunities.
Bis jetzt klingt das alles so ziemlich mit dem, was ich sagen kann. Okay, ja. Ja, macht Sinn.
To move up the economic ladder, thanks to a booming economy and a bunch of government programs. So now let's move forward in time to the 1970s. Welcome to the 1970s. A lot has changed. The economy is producing a lot more prosperity to go around, as you can see by this graph, and we'll see how that's all being distributed in a second. But first, let's check in on my pay. I'm still working in a factory. I now earn about $66,000. That's an improvement from the 50s. Or should I say we? Like millions of other women, my wife has entered the workforce. They still only earn 60% of what men do, but look, they're breaking into the workforce. Nearly half of all women are going to be working by the end of the decade. Partly as a push for freedom and economic autonomy, but partly as a necessity. It's becoming harder for a family to be supported by a single earner. The result is that our income is better off than it was in the 50s, but things are also kind of expensive right now. Inflation is up, partly because there's war in the Middle East and they're cutting us off oil. So there's long lines at these gas stations and everything is more expensive. Anyway, check out my house. I had to pay $230,000 for this house. Housing is getting more expensive and the government is raising the interest rate to slow down inflation, which
ist ein bisschen teurer auf jeden Fall. Sind 3,5 Jahresgehälter.
is making my monthly payment a little more
Oder sagen wir mal 4.
expensive. Home purchasing is becoming a little less accessible to the median, but I still have this cool house. Okay, let's go back to this super useful graph that tells us how the economic spoils are being shared. Remember, that's me, the median income earner. And look, my income continues to grow at the same rate as the high income and low income earners in our country. The growing economy is being shared by these different income groups. It's actually pretty impressive how tight everything is moving together as the economy grows. Oh, and look, they've started collecting data on how much more CEOs are making than the typical employee. Looks like by the middle of the decade, it's about 26 times more. Wait, are CEOs making too much? Is that bad? What do you think? I don't know. Let's keep an eye on this chart as time continues and we can assess if we think this is unfair. Okay, but what about the American dream? How easy it is to make more than your parents? Well, if I'm an adult in the 1970s, it means I was born in the 1950s, which according to this data set means I'm 80% likely to earn more than my parents. I mean, pretty good. The American dream seems to be doing pretty well. So I would say that
Also in den 70ern läuft's noch gut in Amerika. Ne? 70er Jahre.
economic life in the 1970s is better for the median earner than it was in the 50s. And something that we're not covering here because we're looking at the cold hard data is that there's also a revolution happening that's making it more equal and more fair for minority groups in the United States. So these are good trends. Let's see how they continue as we move on to the 1990s.
Guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.
To get to the 90s, we have to go through the 80s and look at all of this economic growth. The president has been very busy
Oh, now it's Reagan time.
slashing taxes, getting rid of regulation and social programs, and rejiggering the economy to benefit businesses, making it harder for workers to gather and get leverage over their employers.
Uh-oh.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
And look, we are arriving to the 1990s. What a great decade. Hi, me again. I'm out of the collage world.
Now shit is about to start. Jetzt geht's los. Der Reagan Shitstorm starts. Jetzt geht alles den Bach runter.
Because I gotta tell you about the sponsor of today's video, because if I didn't have sponsors, I wouldn't be able to make videos. Thank you, Staiy, for sponsoring today's video.
Oh, yeah,
I'm very
Staiy.
excited about this one. It's actually a part of a trend in the world that I've been more and more excited about, which is the advent of eSIMs. I know that sounds really nerdy, but eSIMs have changed my life. In the old days, when I would go to another country, I would go into some kiosk at the airport and buy a physical SIM card and put it into my phone so that I could get 5 gigabytes of data for my phone while I was in the other country. And once the 5 gigabytes was up, that was it. Staiy sells eSIMs, where there is no physical SIM card. All you do is download the app and then choose from the hundreds of countries and territories and regions that they have in their marketplace. So many different countries. I think they've got them all, plus territories. Choose how much data you want, between 1 gig and 1,000. Built-in ad blocking. Staiy is giving my audience 15% off.
Warte mal, ich kann hier vorspringen. Von YouTube Native aus. Hä? Hat YouTube mir gerade die Möglichkeit gegeben, die Werbung zu skippen? Oh, crazy. Ich kann den individuellen... Krass.
90s.
Mit Premium kann man sogar die Sponsoren von YouTube-Kanälen skippen, die nichts mit YouTube selber zu tun haben. Krass. Das wusste ich gar nicht, dass YouTube Premium da einen eingebauten Sponsorblock hat. Krass.
Standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union is over, and people are stoked. We enter the 1990s with this little recession. We're getting ready for a big surge of more growth thanks to the rise of the internet. Remember, I am still playing the role of the middle income earner, okay? So it's not like I was born back in the 50s and I've been growing up. I am a young adult who is the middle income earner. How am I doing? So I still work at a factory. America is still a manufacturing powerhouse here in the 90s, though that is literally right about to change. I wish I could warn myself. My household brings in
Vorsicht!
$76,000 a year, which is definitely better than the 50s and 60s, but you can kind of see that things are flattening out. And in fact, I'm not making that much more than I was in the late 70s. Check out my cool 90s house. Cost me $273,000. That's almost 4 times our yearly income. Way more expensive than in the 50s. How
Alter, stell mal vor, nur 4 Jahreseinkommen kostet dein Haus. Nur 4. Nur 4. Crazy. Das ist ja ein Träumchen.
housing is getting a little less affordable. Okay, the economy's doing well. How are we sharing all of this economic prosperity? Remember, we started back in the 50s and we saw how the high income, the low income, and me, the middle income, we all saw similar growth in our income gains. We all got in on economic growth equally. That continued through the 70s. But wait, look what happens right here.
Jetzt kommt Reagan und now shit is about to change.
Whoa. They're diverging. It's around the 1980s when you see the top earners start to pull away from the rest of us. Their income is going up faster than mine, and my income is going up a little faster than the low-income population. Okay, that's unsettling. I liked it more when they were all kind of like on top of each other, growing at the same rate. We'll keep an eye on this graph, but there's a bunch of other graphs starting to come out. Another divergence happening on how productive the economy is versus how much I get paid. They're both going up at the same time. I'm more productive, I get paid more. Cool. But around the same
Und jetzt 80er Jahre. Die Produktivität geht hoch, aber die Bezahlung bleibt dieselbe.
time, the same split happens. My pay starts to flatline, even as productivity continues to go up.
Ja.
So then there's this period that starts around 1979 in the early 80s, where we see this pulling apart between economic growth and what typical workers and their families receive from that economic growth.
So who's getting in on all this extra productivity? This growth that's happening in our economy, if not me? Well, let's check in on those CEOs. So remember back in the 70s, CEOs were making like 25 times more than the typical worker. Kind of seems like a lot. Let's see what happens here. Oh my God, look at this.
Trickle down effect, boys.
Okay,
It trickles down von ganz weit oben.
whoa, by the end of the 90s, CEOs are making almost 400 times the typical worker. And I thought 20 times was a lot.
Those at the top are receiving much larger shares of that growing economy than those at the middle or at the bottom of the wage distribution. So that pulling apart, that increasing economic inequality is apparent no matter how you look at it. That
Wichtig ist hier immer die Frage, würde mich interessieren, ist das für Deutschland auch so verlaufen? Bei dieser Frage musst du konzentriere dich mal nicht auf Länder, also nimm mal das Land weg. Ne? Das hier kannst du dir selber beantworten, denn das, was da passiert ist, wir haben in Amerika das gleiche, also da regiert der Kapitalismus, ne? Also da geht es halt um Geld und es geht um Deregulierung. Ja, je mehr Deregulierung, desto mehr außer Kontrolle der Kapitalismus ist, desto mehr passiert das da. Denn der Graph, den du gerade gesehen hast, also diese Divergence, ist in dem Zeitraum passiert, in dem Reagan angefangen hat, den Kapitalmarkt zu deregulieren und komplett durchgedreht ist. Die Schlussfolgerung wäre also, das ist nicht zu dem Zeitpunkt passiert, in dem das in Amerika passiert ist, aber es passiert. Ne? Es passiert in einer verzögert und versetzt.
pie is going increasingly to the very top.
Okay, but isn't inequality often seen as a byproduct of rapid economic growth? Could this be a good thing for our economy? Yes, people are getting really rich really fast, but it's because they're innovating and making our economy more productive. And plus, everything I've shown you is before taxes, guys. So like the rich pay a lot of taxes. Okay, so let's see what happens to the income of the rich people after taxes. Here we go. Oh, okay. Well, the taxes didn't do that much. There's something going on here. The rich are getting really rich really fast. I mean, what these lines all show is that 1980 was kind of this inflection point in our economy, where the top earners kind of started to get in on most of the prosperity. And yes, there are economists who argue that inequality isn't bad for an economy. It actually spurs growth and investment into the economy, and eventually that raises all boats. It trickles down.
Trickle-down economy. Daher kommt das.
And advocates for this way of thinking say that we shouldn't focus on inequality, but instead on poverty reduction. Okay, poverty reduction? How we doing? Poverty plummeted after World War II, but you can see that at this time, in like 1980, when inequality starts to get really bad, poverty basically stays the same. Goes up for a big series of years. So this is concerning, and this is my interpretation of the data. I'm sure some of you have very different interpretations, and I would love to see you down in the comments. Anyway, let's check in on the American dream. America's all about big risk, big rewards. So yeah, inequality's happening, but like, if you can go from rags to riches, maybe that's very American and okay. If I was born in the 1970s, I'm now an adult in the 1990s, and the data says that 59% of us born to the middle income will out-earn our parents. So that means that 40% of my peers here in the middle income will earn the same or less than their parents.
Ja.
Even as
Schon in den 90ern.
we are seeing all of this economic growth. I mean, you can see this trend here. The American dream of being able to move up the ladder is becoming less and less a reality for a bigger and bigger portion of the population. Okay, so that was a big change from all the trends. Let's see what happens next.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Okay, we're moving into the new millennium. America's fighting
2000er, let's go.
a couple of wars. The economy is actually doing pretty well until, whoops, whoa. The bankers got a little loosey-goosey for a couple of years, making obscene amounts of money and crashing the entire world economy. But okay, let's move on from the biggest recession of our time. We're arriving to the 2010s. This is a world that most of us are familiar with. Let's see how the median income earner fares.
Uh-oh.
I don't work in a factory anymore. All of those jobs have dried up and been shipped to Asia. So I now work as a middle manager at an insurance company, and my household income is $81,000 a year. Which is, wait a minute, same as 1997, but wait, during this same 13-year period from 1997 to 2010, the economy grew by this much. I mean, that line's going up. The economy's making more stuff, there's more prosperity. Even when you adjust for inflation per capita, the economy grew. There should be more to go around. But my household pay is the same as it was 13 years previous. Why? Well, we'll see in a second, but first, let's talk about my house. I always love talking about my house. Look at this beauty. I can still afford a house. In fact, here in like post-recession America, housing prices are actually pretty low. The bubble burst. Interest rates had to go down to stimulate the economy, and so home purchasing was actually pretty accessible for a few years.
Ja. Auf einmal konnte sich jeder ein Haus leisten wieder. Mein Gott.
But don't worry, housing prices will be back on the rise in a second. And in fact, they'll start rising faster than my income, making housing less and less affordable. And homeownership still seems to be available mostly for certain groups, and not as much for others. In fact, that hasn't changed much since the segregation days. Meanwhile, I think I know what's going to happen to this graph. Yep, the rich are just getting richer faster than my income is going up, and my income's kind of stagnating. Okay, what about the CEOs? Did they pay a price for the big bubble person? Nope, they didn't pay. I mean, they kind of did up and down, but they're still, by the end of the decade, getting paid hundreds of times more than me.
400 Mal mehr als der durchschnittliche Arbeiter. Ach, wunderschön, wunderschön.
Maybe they think they are hundreds of times more productive and they deserve it. I mean, you get the point on the inequality stuff. This is what we've been hearing about for a long time.
Unequal, yeah.
All of these graphs have the same shape. This great divergence that happens in the 80s, where the economy is growing, but
das hat mit, ich möchte das nochmal sagen, Reagan, in Amerika hat das mit Reagan angefangen.
the wages for the average person just kind of flatten while the top earners just sort of get in on all of that prosperity. Okay, but the American dream, you can climb the ladder, right? So if you're born in the 1980s, which I was, you're now an adult in the 2010s, and it looks like for the median earner, the majority of us will earn the same or less than our parents. Yeah, this is a problem and probably doesn't seem fair to a lot of people. But wait, there's hope.
Star Trek, Terminator, Time Cop, Time After Time, Quantum Leap, Wrinkle in Time, Somewhere in Time, Hot Tub Time Machine. Hot Tub Time Machine.
Okay, I'm back. 2025.
Jetzt wird's aktuell. Okay.
That's when I'm making this video. So that's modern day for me. We went through a pandemic, the economy kind of got freaked out for a little bit, and the median income earner actually started to see some gains after years and years of flatlining. So you do see some potential movement here, some hope. But let's get back to the original question that we started this video with. Is the average American better off now than they were back in the 50s and over these decades that we talked about? In a lot of ways, the answer is yes. Especially if you are a woman or not white, then the answer is yes, at least in terms of economic opportunity. But what we've seen on this journey is that the American economy has produced an incredible amount of prosperity and growth over these last 7 decades. And that was shared broadly by all of us for a time. But in the last 30, 40 years, the data is very clear that the fruits of the economic growth these days have not been broadly shared. One group is collecting most of the growth. And I didn't even talk about wealth. Like the stuff.
Ja, das ist nur der Verdienst. Das ist noch nicht das Vermögen.
You just own and how that makes money.
Yeah.
We're talking just about income on this. Now, this isn't the first time that we've been in this situation. The top 10% collected almost half of all the income way back in the early 1900s before World War II. But we changed that. Look. And the income starts to be distributed more equally. But this graph tells the same story. Look, 1980, boom, here it goes.
Wieder hoch.
We're back. We're back to where we were.
Genau. Und jetzt ist es Zeit wieder.
Now, does this mean that our economy is broken? No, actually. Our economy is not broken. It is working exactly how it was designed to work. And this, and this, and this, and this, it's the result of changes to the rules, policies that end up determining who gets the money and who doesn't. These policies are made by people that we elect. And if we don't think that this is fair, we have the power to pressure them to design a system that is fair. Now, the medium income earner doesn't have nearly as much power these days. The top income earners and the corporations have really gotten their foot in the door for the people who have the power to set the rules. So it's harder than ever. But this still is a democracy. And if we don't think a system is fair, we still have the power to pressure our politicians to change it. And it's not actually just about income inequality. Yes, that has risen. The rich get richer much faster. It's also about the American dream, this idea of being able to move up. If you get educated, if you work hard, as inequality has gone up, the American dream has gone down. These graphs are built on robust data, and this is the story that it tells. The rungs of the economic ladder have gotten wider and wider apart. And that American dream, ironically, a term coined by a rich investment banker born into a rich family in New York City, that dream is looking more and more like a myth.
Ja. Ist es auch. Ist es auch, tatsächlich. Und wir sind an einem Punkt, also sehr, sehr stabiles Video erstmal an der Stelle. Nichts, was uns vielleicht in der Form überrascht, aber sehr schön, dass es dargestellt wird. Denn es müssen mehr Leute verstehen. Es ist wirklich wichtig, das zu verstehen. Denn nur wenn du es verstehst, kannst du Schlussfolgerungen treffen, die du normalerweise nicht triffst. Es macht einen Unterschied, in welchem Land du dieses System anlegst, aber nicht, weil der Outcome nicht derselbe ist, sondern nur, weil du dich an unterschiedlichen Punkten in diesem Graph befindest. Also das, was wir gerade gesehen haben mit der Distanz von den, wie die wo verdienen, ne? Das hat einfach nur, das ist in Amerika so und in anderen Ländern, die mit dem gleichen Prinzip des Kapitalismus arbeiten, ist es wahrscheinlich hier irgendwo. Das ist anhand dieses Graphs. Aber am Ende des Tages bewegt es sich an diesem Graph entlang. Mit Blick auf Deutschland explizit genauso, natürlich, ja, genauso. Und da geht es nur erstmal um die Leute, die hohes Einkommen haben und nicht um die Leute, die Vermögen haben. Das ist halt auch nochmal so ein Ding. Und ich glaube, den Vorteil, den Deutschland hat eine progressive Einkommenssteuer. Das ist auf der einen Seite gut und auf der anderen Seite schlecht, weil sie unisono zu hoch ist. Also die Einkommensteuer und nicht nur die Einkommensteuer selber, sondern die Einkommensteuer und die sozialversicherungspflichtigen Abgaben sind zusammen einfach zu viel Belastung für Leute, die ganz normales Einkommen haben. Also 99% der Leute, die jetzt nicht nur hier zugucken, sondern eben auch einfach 99% der Leute allgemein. Ja? So. Das Einkommen ist also da gar nicht so das Problem, sondern die Anhäufung von Vermögen. Und die Anhäufung von Vermögen wurde in diesem Video gar nicht gesprochen, darum gehe ich da ganz kurz nochmal drauf ein. Wir haben es leider mit einer Generation zu tun oder mit einer Gesellschaftsgruppe zu tun, die sich per se dazu bereit erklärt hat, für reiche Menschen und vermögende Menschen ins Feld zu ziehen und diese zu verteidigen. Und ich bin ein vehementer Verfechter davon, das zu ändern. Weil es macht keinen Sinn. Es macht keinen Sinn. Sachen, mit denen ich konfrontiert bin, ist beispielsweise, als jemand mit meinen Standpunkten wird mir immer negativ vorgeworfen, dass ja, aber ich sollte das ja nicht sagen, weil ich bin in der Schweiz und das ist ja alles Niedrigsteuerland und so weiter. Und das ist ein erster Fehler, den man macht im Zusammenhang mit der Wahrnehmung von Deutschland. Das ist nicht so. In der Schweiz gibt es eine Vermögenssteuer, die eben genau das kompensieren soll. Ich würde das Argument aufmachen, dass sie zu niedrig ist, aber sie ist da. Und Vermögen wird halt in der Schweiz auch eingezogen, selbst wenn du es im Ausland hast. Das heißt, die Vermögenssteuer interessiert sich überhaupt nicht, ob das Vermögen irgendwo ist, was du hast, oder ob du es irgendwo anders hast. Es wird kollektiv einfach abgezogen. Dann noch mit, also das ist vereinfacht ausgedrückt, weil da gibt es noch Rahmenbedingungen mit, was gibst du ab, wenn du investierst und so weiter und so fort. Ne? Aber per se ist sie da. Das gibt es in Deutschland nicht. Wenn du in Deutschland reich bist, ist das ein Schlaraffenland für dich. Besonders, wenn du von deinem Reichtum leben kannst, weil du kein Einkommen mehr hast. Das ist problematisch. Es muss eine Vermögenssteuer geben. Es muss wirklich eine Vermögenssteuer geben und wenn man diese Vermögenssteuer ansetzt, dann setzt man die auch genauso an, wie sie in der Schweiz gedacht ist, nämlich als Steuer für etwas, das unabhängig davon, wo du es hast, aufgrund der Tatsache, dass du da bist, halt einfach 1% abgibst. Und nein, das ist ganz wichtig, da scheißen sich ja auch eine Menge Leute ein. Ja, aber ziehen die weg, die ziehen dann weg und dann ziehen die ja weg, dann gehen die ja weg mit ihrem Geld. Nein. Reiche Menschen können gehen, aber ihr Geld bleibt genau da, wo es ist. Denn es gibt die Wegzugssteuer. Das heißt, du kannst dir gerne irgendwo anders einen Sitz holen und kannst da leben. Das Kapital ist aber gebunden. Denn die Wegzugssteuer bricht dir das Genick. Gerne mal gucken, wie hoch die Wegzugssteuer ist. Einfach gucken, einfach nicht mal auf mich beziehen. Guck einfach schnell die Wegzugssteuer. Schon mal davon gehört, Wegzugssteuer? Ja, 30%, rupp, weg. Mindestens. Abhängig davon, in welche Richtung es geht, kann es auch mal ein bisschen mehr sein. Man muss sich also keine Angst haben. Man muss absolut keine Angst haben in diesem Zusammenhang. Gar nicht. Also, die Realität ist leider genau das, wo wir es gerade gesehen haben. Wir haben eine gigantische Diskrepanz zwischen dem, was in den höchsten 1% vorgeht und dem, was die Allgemeinheit repräsentiert. Und das kann man kompensieren. Das kann man kompensieren. Das kann man kompensieren und das sollte man auch kompensieren. Es geht hier nicht um die radikale Forderung, den Kapitalismus abzuschaffen, weil das musst du nicht mal. Du musst nur für faire Umsetzungen sorgen, um die Verteilung ein bisschen gleichmäßiger zu machen. Das geht schon. Und das geht sogar durch relativ einfache Rahmenbedingungen durch die Politik. Aber nicht mit der CDU, nicht mit der SPD und nicht mit der CSU. Sondern wahrscheinlich nur durch die Linke. Denn alle anderen Parteien in diesem Zusammenhang spielen dieses Spiel dann halt beim Erhalten des Status Quos mit. Man darf sich nur nicht austricksen lassen. Die Probleme der Gesellschaft werden nicht von Arbeitslosen verursacht. Die Probleme der Gesellschaft werden auch nicht von die Ausländer verursacht. Das funktioniert nicht. Wie die Grünen auch. Also, ich mach's mal ganz einfach, ne? Als die grüne Jugendvorsitzende Eat the Rich auf ihre Käppe geschrieben hat und das aufgesetzt hat, habe ich mir gedacht, bist du blöde? Das ist deine Zielgruppe, das ist deine Wählerschaft. Du willst doch nicht deine eigene Wählerschaft aufessen. Wovon redest du? Setz die Käppi ab. Leg die Mütze ab. Es ist kein Geheimnis, wirklich nicht, dass die grünen Wähler nicht nur akademisch weiter sind, sondern eben auch schon mal ein bisschen privilegierter dastehen. Darum würde ich es jetzt nicht, also du kannst gerne wegen anderen Sachen die Grünen wählen, aber nicht deswegen. Ich denke nicht, dass das realistisch ist. Ist halt auch irgendwie, ne? Ist so ein bisschen Diskrepanz. Die ist dann halt einfach, also du bist dann halt mit den Forderungen in der falschen Partei. Meines Erachtens. Es ist trotzdem ein Problem. Mal gucken. Interessantes Thema.